It's Friday, July 14th, 2023, TGIF, your day weather podcast, brought to you today by Cowboy State Daily. See them at cowboystatedaily.com. Well, lots of big thunderheads boiling up across the high plains and parts of the Rocky Mountain West yesterday afternoon and evening and overnight. So we had lots of views like this one, some big thunderstorms out on the eastern Colorado plains yesterday afternoon and evening and last night, as well as parts of Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas, as that moisture right along that cool front boundary to our east, helping to initiate those showers and thunderstorms. And that same cool front is going to be just hanging out, pushing slowly southwest across the plains and up to the front range. So that's going to make it a little bit cooler today and into the start of the weekend along and east of the divide. You'll still be cooking and still real hot if you're on the western slope, with the warmer, drier air continuing west of the divide, cooler, moist air east of the divide, which has been the story for weeks now. So this will, again, make for some afternoon and evening thunderstorm activity out on the eastern plains and front range areas for the next 3 days. Now, the more severe weather threat will be more into the central plains. There'll be some strong thunderstorms, but the more severe weather threat going to be further east. We do see it warmer next week. We'll start to see temperatures rebound some on Sunday, but by early to mid next week, we'll see some heat expand further north and further east into the region, coming up out of the desert southwest, where it continues to be extremely hot there. And some of that heat pushes north and east, but that heat also will help draw up moisture like a straw out of the southwest United States and Mexico and push it further north into the Rockies and High Plains. So an uptick in monsoonal moisture that's still on schedule. I think we'll really start to see it, especially on Colorado's western slope and into Utah and further north into the region, beginning as early as Tuesday of next week, and then remaining in the forecast for the middle to the end of next week and next weekend. So just some big thunderstorms. We did have severe weather again yesterday, and we'll take a look at what happens with some of these showers and thunderstorms when they get strong and produce a lot of hail. Thankfully, yesterday the severe weather wasn't as bad as we have seen over the last week or so, but we still did see some big thunderstorms, some large hail, especially across portions of eastern and southeastern Colorado. And thunderstorms got far north, all the way up into northern Wyoming there along the Bighorn Mountains, as that cool, moist air pushing up against the eastern side of the mountain ranges. And that's what led to some showers and thunderstorms. Now, thanks to Gary Stone from the Nebraska Panhandle Research and Extension Center, these are not fun pictures to show you, but if you remember back to just this past weekend, July 8th, that cool, moist day that developed along and east of the divide, and we had these very heavy thunderstorms that started in eastern and east central Wyoming, then tracked southeast across Nebraska, and they were just giant hail producers. Now, you're saying, well, what is that? Well, that's what's left of corn. Yes, that was corn originally, and the hail was so bad, so deep, so widespread, and so heavy, just taking it down to the stalks. And this is unfortunately what hail can do. And when you have a spring like we did, when it's cool and wet, historically, cool, wet springs tend to lead to higher incidence of hail. There's a lot of reasons for that, but a wet spring, which is great, and it does bring good things like moisture, unfortunately, we do tend to see more hailstorms, more hail events. And unfortunately, this was just a bad one. So this is corn, and this is what's left of some sugar beets. So corn, what's left of sugar beets after the hail, and this is what's left of dry beans. Dry beans is completely wiped out there across portions of western Nebraska. Now, I don't want to end on a downer note. Because of that wet spring and the wet summer, the most recent drought monitor that came out yesterday is quite remarkable when we compare it to a year ago. Look at Colorado. Colorado's drought completely gone. Wyoming is down to just a couple of little tiny patches where it's just abnormally dry and really nothing officially in drought. And across a lot of the west, we've got a lot of white now that has come on in. And it's really important when you compare it to a year ago. And we'll do that here in a second. The worst drought conditions are now shifting and this staying in the center part of the country there. parts of the southern plains, but even there, drought conditions have really improved. So, yes, you get bad with the good, but if you look at where we were a year ago, the drought conditions in the far western and southwestern United States and many areas of the western high plains have improved dramatically, to the point where some areas of the west are just completely out of drought, and you can see that eastward shift of the drought conditions more towards the Midwest and the Corn Belt. And we're hoping in the coming weeks that more Corn Belt rain is coming. I think it will, so conditions there may ease a little bit. But a big change, unfortunately, this is what happens when you get a lot of moisture in the spring. You get a lot of hail. This morning's satellite photo, you can see that swirl of clouds, that deep low there up just west of Hudson Bay, continuing to push cooler air back to the southwest. And there's your nocturnal thunderstorms that just basically are continuing early this morning from what developed late yesterday afternoon and evening, moving out into the plain states. And that pattern is going to just repeat itself. And you can see where these thunderstorms are going this morning. This is the same pattern we've had all week for the most part. The thunderstorms get initiated along the eastern areas of the Front Range, then they head out into the plains in the evening and nighttime hours. This is going to continue into the weekend. And there's that big Hudson Bay low. There's that big hot high in the desert southwest. And here's your temperature anomaly for later today. This is for 6 p.m. So you can see that by early evening, that cooler air and the big contrast between the very warm air there and the very cool air there. So you're going to have the activity with the showers and thunderstorms kind of where those two boundaries are going to meet. And here's your thunderstorm forecast for later today. So very busy late afternoon and evening coming for Kansas, some Front Range areas, then down south into New Mexico, getting into the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles, and back here into southern Arizona, New Mexico, and Mexico as well, and then spreading into the Corn Belt later today and tonight. So you can see the severe weather threat definitely going to focus in on Kansas and Oklahoma and western Missouri today, more general thunderstorms elsewhere. Now, temperatures on Saturday east of the divide. Look at that contrast. And yes, there's a fair amount of distance here, but that contrast really driving a lot of what we're observing with the weather. If you just are on the other side of the mountains, you're baking. If you're on the eastern side of the mountains, you're like, where did summer go? And thunderstorms will again be right along that boundary. This is for Saturday. A little bit more of a southward, eastward shift. Only a little bit of widely scattered thunderstorm activity here, but more active along the Colorado Front Range down into the southwestern United States and shifting south and east. By Monday, we start to see that high surge northward. So the warmth expands. So this begins on Sunday, and by early to middle of next week, all the way from Saskatchewan, southern Alberta, and then across the Front Range of the Montana Rockies, all the way down into Mexico, California to Texas, it gets hot everywhere. Temperatures really warm up early next week. As that happens, and as the high gets established there in New Mexico, the clockwise flow really starts to drop that subtropical moisture. So as we've been mentioning over the last few days, that subtropical moisture, when we look at the precipitable water, especially look at the last frames here. Now, the beginning frames here start Monday. So you can see a lot more white and green now getting into parts of the Great Basin and parts of the Central Rockies, and importantly, the western slope of Colorado into Utah, the Four Corners area there. But that green also starts to get pushed up further north. And the end result, beginning Tuesday of next week and going through the following weekend, both sides of the Continental Divide get into the action with afternoon and evening thunderstorms. And it will stay very warm, but the afternoon cloud buildup and those afternoon and evening thunderstorms will help throttle back some of the real hot temperatures as well. Have yourself a great weekend, and we will see you next on Monday.